and emotionally attracted to. So these are all the terms that are used here. Notice the language of sex assigned at birth. Biology is meaningless, one's inner desires are supreme, and the genderbread person offers similar categories. You saw that, right? This is the stuff. If it's not in our school yet, and I love our teachers and administrators, I am not criticizing, but this is the curriculum that is being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and elections matter, and politicians matter, and they will push it and push it and push it. So, we'll go on. Scores of colleges have entire departments dedicated to sexual orientation and gender identity studies, with courses such as digital queers, public space, art and performance in the digital age, queer politics and performance, queer theories and histories. By the way, you could just go to Iowa State or Iowa University. That's where I'm getting. I just looked in Iowa and said, well, what do they have? These are their courses. Okay, I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. Like, oh, that must be the East Coast. It's in Iowa. Okay. Numerous groups have compiled pride lists of LGBTQ friendly colleges and shame lists for colleges that hold back from a full-scale endorsement. Athlete Ally, after providing LGBTQ-friendly policy suggestions for college athletic departments, now publishes praise shame lists of schools based on their LGBTQ friendliness. Corporate Equality Index is the same for American business. So these are groups that basically, if you are fully LGBTQ affirming, you get a high score. If you don't, you get a low score. So these are the praise lists and the shame lists. They have them for colleges, for athletic programs, and for corporations. And the last thing you want as a corporation or a school is to get a low score from these organizations, because then you're going to be demonized and targeted for some pretty severe, I'm just going to call opposition. So, these are organizations that are actually set up specifically to shame organizations for not being affirming enough of these policies. Following, pervasive, everywhere, right? Where has our head been? Probably in the sand. Like, this doesn't exist. It's everywhere. An increasing number of colleges are allowing a third gender designation on their college registration. And many states are now including a third gender on government IDs. Many colleges now include a preferred pronoun. They, them, their, vi, ver, vis, zi, zim, zer. Yeah, these are real. Component to freshman orientation. So in other words, you go to freshman orientation, now you're going to learn all your gender pronouns. So this is a couple of years ago. October marked the first International Pronouns Day. Organizers assert referring to people by the pronouns they determine for themselves is basic to human dignity. Dozens of businesses and over 100 colleges endorsed the day. In January, a couple Januaries ago, Stanford University, amid much fanfare, unveiled its new all-gender locker room. Numerous elementary teachers across the country are coming forward as non-binary and insisting their students address them as not as Mr. or Ms., but as mix. How's that work for an elementary kid? I know. I think you should just put the I between the X and say it's mixed up, right? So they're... Many segments of the church are embracing the we are sexual beings assumption. As has been documented before in this newsletter, the ELCA, for instance, has developed entire liturgies to bless same-sex unions and gender transitions. Entire liturgies to celebrate this. And do we even need to mention advertising and magazine covers? What really are they selling? And what is being used to sell? And what unstated belief are they promulgating? These preceding paragraphs are but the tip of the iceberg, and beneath it all is the nearly unchallenged assumption we are sexual beings. But is it true? Would it help if we studied the root of that assumption? If you dug just a little ways beneath the surface, you'd uncover the name Alfred Kinsey. You're shaking your head, and right you should be, right? Most people probably know him best for his two hugely influential books, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male and Sexual Behavior in the Human Female. In these works, Kinsey purported to provide scientific evidence to support the assertion we are sexual beings. But reality tells a different story. Kinsey was passionately atheistic, even anti-theistic, strongly antagonistic toward God. He endorsed Darwinian evolution and all of its implications for sexual morality. In other words, any and every sexual expression is acceptable. He frequented nudist camps, even practiced nudism with his wife and children. He appeared nude in front of students, even watched them bathing. He and his wife welcomed multiple sexual partners. He endorsed and practiced unmentionable, sickening sexual acts. Believe me, you don't want to know. On all ages. Mr. Kinsey founded the Institute for Sex Research at Indiana University, in which his inner circle of researchers practiced spouse swapping, even filming many of their engagements supposedly for research purposes. The alleged scientific evidence behind his books was obtained through immoral and unethical methods. Among his specifically targeted interviewees were imprisoned sex offenders and prostitutes, especially those of the most perverse variety. His research on children is beyond description and can scarcely be described as anything but criminal and depraved. Based on his, quote, research, he concluded there is no scientific reason for considering particular types of sexual activity as intrinsically, in their biological origins, normal or abnormal. This man's research lies beneath the assumption we are sexual beings. It is supposed scientific underpinnings that were used to support the assertion. And as presented earlier, his findings were, and in many cases continue to be, largely unquestioned. He is still cited in some educational resources as a serious sex researcher. Favorably cited. It's beyond sickening. Isn't it time we question the assumption? Yes, sex is a part of the human experience, even having the blessing of God within the marriage of husband and wife for the purposes of one flesh union and procreation. But it is not of the essence of being human. If it were, we'd be forced to say that Jesus was somehow less than human for not engaging in a sexual act. Further, we would insinuate that celibate singles are somehow subhuman in their celibacy. Instead of accepting the assumption we are sexual beings, we would do better to confess the historical truth that we are religious beings. We are wired to desire God, to know Him, to fellowship with Him. Scripture declares that God has set eternity in our hearts so that our hearts instinctively yearn for fellowship with Him. Knowing God precedes all else. True fulfillment is found in knowing Him and in being known by Him. Our identity is not found in any sexual behavior or preference, but in our created and redeemed status as children of God. The need to appreciate this truth cannot be overstated. With this established, we can move forward into God's design and will for His creation, design and will imprinted on our bodies and in our hearts, our conscience, and clearly revealed in His Word. We are male or female. There is no spectrum here. Yes, there are biological abnormalities that have resulted from the fall. Yes, there are numerous ways to express oneself as male or female, but there's no third gender option. As males and females, our sexual organs have clearly been designed to join with their complement. So, for example, what I mean by that is this. Your heart does what it does without needing anybody else's heart to pump your blood. Your lungs don't need anybody else's lungs to do the whole oxygenation, what's the word I'm looking for? To get oxygen to your body. Okay, it doesn't need anybody else. Your liver doesn't need anybody else's liver. But you have one set of organs that don't reach their goal unless they're joined to another set of organs, the sexual reproduction organs. It's pretty obvious that those are complementary and they're designed with a telos, an end, a goal, right? So, for example, if you go to the heart doctor because you have a heart problem and he doesn't know the heart is supposed to pump blood, I wouldn't want him to operate on my heart. If he doesn't know what it's designed to do, what is its purpose, if he doesn't know it's like if you brought your car to me and said, hey, can you fix it? And I say, oh yeah, I have no idea what that thing does, but I'm going to take it out. Because I think it's, you don't want to do that because I don't know its purpose, right? So if you don't know what a thing's purpose is, then you can't speak to what it's designed for and how it should be used. All right? So, That's what I mean by that. It is true that we may discover our desires that we may discover our desires at odds with our body's design, and we should not make light of this, for this is a great source of inner angst for those with such desires. In other words, sometimes people discover that they have desires that are at odds with their bodies, same-sex desires, gender dysphoria. Never make light of these things. These are not light things. But would it surprise anybody here to wake up and discover that you have desires at odds with what God has called good? It shouldn't. They may be different, but every last one of us here, like I've said before, sin smells good to us. And like dogs think stinky things are the most like delicious treat in the world, and they want to roll in it and then eat it, and I don't understand, but that's what dogs do. But we're no different, right? So we never make light of these desires. Too often in the church, when we preach against these things, it make it sound like you are a really bad person because you have those sets of sinful desires. But I'm a good person because I have different sinful desires. So, someone once said, Christians are really bad at getting mad at people who sin differently than they do. Right? So don't make light of this. These are real. But nor should we simply affirm the desires. Instead, we should see our misaligned desires as evidence of our fallen condition. If truth be told, we all have desires opposed to the Creator's design and will. Every last one of us. The lie we are sexual beings connects sexual expression to identity, and thereby encourages us, even requires us, to affirm and pursue these inner desires to be fully human. The truth, we are religious beings, however, encourages us to pursue the Creator's design, to see it as good, both intrinsically a good thing and something good for us. And as best as we are able, to align our lives with the design, believing God's design is best for human flourishing. Now this is where the rubber meets the road. Do we believe what God says is good is not only intrinsically good, but good for us? Every last one of us is going to battle that. Because your kids and your grandkids battle this. When you tell them, I don't want you to do that, or I want you to do this, they will battle you tooth and nail because they don't see how it's actually going to be a good thing for them. Why is doing my homework? Like, the teacher's not going to grade it, so why bother doing it? Right? Okay. It's this whole concept of discipline and knowledge, and this is lost on a kid, right? Because this is actually good for your flourishing, right? Why would I do this if no one's going to check it? Because there's value in the action, right? In the activity. So God says this is good, and then that means not only good in itself, but good for you, will result in good things. Do you believe Him? So that's where you'll find sin. I find it there. Because it's like, yes, but I still don't want to. Right? So that's where you will discover, all of us will discover, that desire for sin is so strong. Because when it comes down to, do I believe Him? And will I act on it? That's where you'll discover it. All across the board. Okay? Okay, yes, we will fail. Yes, we will give in to our sinful desires. But we don't despair. We don't give up. And we certainly don't affirm the desires as good. We run to God for forgiveness. And God showers us with His abundant and cleansing grace. That's why the church exists, to offer again and again the purifying grace of God in Christ. Further, the church exists to affirm the good of the Creator. We recognize that it is at odds with the culture and with many of the twisted desires screaming for satisfaction within every one of us. But we confidently confess and lovingly insist that what God has called good is truly good and is the goal for which we should be aiming. So together, let us question what has been unquestioned. We are sexual beings, and confess what is true. We are religious beings. So you can actually see this in cultures that reject God. They don't leave a void. Something else fills the gap. And let me give you an image. Okay. There's a choreographed liturgy. It's choreographed body movements. In other words, so I'm not trying to avoid telling you what this is at first. There is something where a large crowd of people would traditionally gather for. There is music, there's chanting, there's choreography, there's exaltation, there's celebration, there is a communal aspect in the beforehand and the afterhand, and it is a regular occurrence, something that is gathered around at least weekly. And in our culture, that's sports, right? Just step back once. And again, sports are a good thing insofar as they go. But step back and consider the whole scene, right? If you were, let's say you came from a different culture completely where sports didn't exist, and you come to this culture, America, and you're kind of trying to figure out what this culture values, right? You would go to the stadiums where people are gathering as communal groups, right? And you would see the wave, and you would hear certain chants and certain songs, and you would see certain cheer leaders, right, directing it all, and you would see a certain liturgy that is built all the way around it, and you would see people pouring their resources into it and then actually adorning their bodies and their property with all. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't be having our favorite teams. I'm saying just step back for a second and say, whoa, how all-encompassing is that? Right? So when I'm saying we are religious beings by nature, we will latch on to things that we will worship as people. So I didn't have time in this article, but just to try to build up evidence for we are religious beings, the Ecclesiastes text about God has put eternity in our hearts, right? Or the St. Augustine famous quote, that our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you, O Lord, right? That we have a desire for something beyond ourselves, and we will set up something to worship. So even in a totally atheistic culture, you want people worshiping something. In our culture also, politics have taken on that role of a religion. It's a very pathetic religion, but it is nonetheless, because that is the means by which we are going to save and transform culture, through politics. So it's another salvation narrative. So we've adopted. Try that sometime. Just step back from our culture and just, instead of just accepting everything that's assumed, question it and start to see what you see. Well, you're going to discover we're religious beings. And that we are sexual beings is a lie, because that's trying to make that totally encompassing of what it means to be human. Sexual pleasure is the definition of human. And if you were to adopt that philosophy, you'd end up with a culture like ours, right? Okay, so thoughts or questions on this piece? This is probably pretty deep and disturbing, and it needs to be, because it's real.
It's just frustrating, I guess, more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
You feel a bit helpless to start in your own family to just, I don't know, it feels like a drop in the bucket trying to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
spread truth in the midst of all this.
And your family may be a drop in a bucket, and your family may be, and your family, and my family. But if we have enough drops in that bucket,
Yes.
right? I mean, this is the sort of thing we need to be aware of, and it's going to take some serious attentiveness to what's happening in our schools. Again, I'm not anti our school. I think our school does a fine job. I've not seen anything overt, but I know the pressure is there curriculum-wise on all of our public schools, and whatever administration is in power, and whatever national standards they are setting, this is already happening. Yes, Barb.
Yesterday I saw a program. It was by the minister or pastor that was involved with the Creation
Mm-hmm.
Museum,
Sure.
and he said that our culture, our country has Bible is stories.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's not a book of history.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based on the first chapter in Genesis.
Absolutely.
And, truth. He said that the serpent is the same as in the Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
It puts into question in our minds as, well, is that what really God said? Is that what he meant?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we have not taught our children or anyone to be able to stand up and speak
Mm-hmm.
what they believe in, be firm in, well, this is what I know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To fight against those questions of, well, is there, just male and female?
Mm-hmm.
Questions in your mind, Satan says.
Mm-hmm.
You can teach them all the stories you want.
Right. But if we put them into the story box, right, right.
Question in their mind about, it's like trying to explain to them, about dinosaurs or
Mm-hmm.
how old the
Mm-hmm.
Earth is and all of this. Oh, well, that's not really important,
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
that, Jesus is.
Right, right, right. Kids aren't stupid, are they? They see that, right? And this is where Satan's really good at what he does. But in our culture, it's, well, science says,
Yeah.
because science is God, right? But here's the thing: science doesn't say anything. Scientists say things. Scientists are biased. Scientists have assumptions. Yeah.
He's a scientist, well, he must know.
He's a scientist, right? He wears that white jacket. He must be objective. He's a person, and he has certain foundational worldview beliefs about reality, and those influence, they color the way he does science. So the scientists say things. Science, if we understood science, it's just a tool in your toolbox for discovery. The scientist then makes interpretations. So we teach our kids to be very careful listeners. Like what does the interpreting the evidence is where scientists mislead us, because they've bought into the atheistic worldview or the naturalistic worldview philosophy. First, you have some great, when you take time to dig into this. I think it was Richard Lewontin, an atheistic evolutionist, talked about how, look, we take the side of science. What he means by that is naturalism, in spite of some of the ridiculous things that it forces us to accept, because, these are his words, we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. Which is like, and I think he was a Harvard scientist, so I mean, he's not just some guy off the street. He's an intelligent man, right? But you get down to it, for a lot of these scientists, that's the foundational. Thomas Nagel, who writes the book Mind and Cosmos, I think is what the name of the book is. Anyway, a famous atheistic philosopher, scientist guy, and basically says that he doesn't want there to be a God because he doesn't want that kind of world to be true. So he's arguing against God because he doesn't want God. Because, and he's honest about it, because it would interfere with the way he wants to live. When you get down to it, that's the problem, is because we want to set science up as this objective thing, free from any influence, any biases. That's just simply not true. When you get down to it, there are people behind it who have certain beliefs and who interpret the evidence in a certain way. So yeah, there's some great questions on age of the earth, dinosaurs, and so forth. There's great evidence to support what the scriptures teach. We're afraid to say those things because one of the tactics of those who attack scripture is to laugh at you, right? And no one likes to be laughed at. How silly of you to believe that humans and dinosaurs would have lived at the same time. Never mind that we've uncovered dinosaur fossils and bones with red blood cells and stretchy tissue still in it, dozens of times. That doesn't make much press, but for obvious reasons, because it certainly flies in the face of a theory that would somehow suggest that these dinosaur bones have been lying there for millions of years and somehow after millions of years still has stretchy tissue and red blood cells in it. That doesn't seem likely, does it? So no, there most certainly are assumptions built in, and I'm not a scientist, I don't even play one on TV, but there's enough evidence there, even accessible to a layperson. Our Tract Resource Center is full of just little booklets. You don't have to read whole books even. You can even watch videos. I mean, there's no shortage of opportunities. I have great, Genesis Apologetics website, genesisapologetics.com, I think it is. Great videos. We watch those with our kids. They loved them. They were entertaining. They were witty. They were well done. They were solid teaching stuff. So there's great resources out there to share with our kids, and I think we would probably do better to watch that than most of the stuff that we're watching that at the end of the day didn't edify us in any way. But you're spot on. Yes?
Janet Smith says, I think, relating back to the article, thank you for this discussion. Lots of really intelligent points to help us adjust our Christian thinking and hearts, as opposed to what the world so slyly has and continues to implant in our thinking.
Thank you, Janet. Yeah, I hope that's a useful article. So my encouragement, and we'll wrap up here. I write these sort of things periodically for the newsletter. So read your newsletter, but then I also excerpt articles out of newsletters and drop them into the Zion blog. The newsletter is also on zionmanning.com, but I take out individual articles and drop them in the blog tab in the Zion website. Lots of these are already on there, and it's an easy way to share it. Just send a link to a friend and say, hey, we talked about this today, and what do you think? But I certainly welcome the conversation, and one of my jobs is, to equip and teach you to do all the work. You guys have to do real jobs, and during the week, my job is to do all this work so that I can share it with you in different capacities. So,
I just wanted to mention Answers in Genesis, and that would be
yes.
website is excellent.
Yeah, Answers in Genesis, very solid. They put out a magazine called Answers.
Yes.
That one, and there's another one put out by a different organization called Creation Magazine, which is also excellent. So Answers in Genesis. There's also a group called ICR, Institute for Creation Research. And I can't remember if it's .com or org. I guess it wrong every time. But ICR is another excellent organization. That they write some pretty high level stuff. It's called Acts and Facts, ACTS, Acts and Facts. It's a monthly little newsletter. They send it to you for free. Now, there's some great stuff in there, but be prepared to encounter some pretty high level scientific stuff too. So some of it's pretty accessible to the layperson, but it's free. But I want you to see that there are some good thinkers out there doing some good science who also are able to say this fully comports with what the scriptures teach. So Answers in Genesis, excellent organization. ICR, great organization. Creation Magazine, great publication. And also Genesis Apologetics. They even have an app you can download on your phone. Great videos and resources for kids and families. I'd point you to those. And if you forget those, ask me. I'd be happy to share. Great places to start.
It's so
Yep.
encouraging to know about these places.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're so immersed in the culture.
Yeah.
Wherever you go, there's a natural history museum.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Always based on evolution theory, which has been disproved
Right.
for centuries, and we still are really good.
And the propagandists, that's the power of propaganda. You just got to say it over and 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 over.
And that's
Yep.
in and through that. It's
Yeah.
just
Right.
taking us to this world.
Right. Yes.
Bridget Gore asked
Yep.
that Dr. It's Lisle, isn't it pronounced Lyle?
Jason Lyle.
Yeah, Jason Lyle.
Jason Lyle, yes.
At
Yeah.
the Biblical Science Institute is good too.
Yes, Jason Lyle. He used to be with Answers in Genesis, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But he writes, Jason, spell his name again,
Lisle.
Lisle, Jason Lyle. He's got some really high level, I mean, not inaccessible, but really good stuff. Another great author who I would recommend, his name is Jonathan, great first name, love it. Sarfati, Sarfati, Sarfati. one book he writes, I know we have, it's right over there on the shelf. It's called Refuting Evolution. You can see it on the far right middle block, right in the middle, far right middle block, Refuting Evolution. That one is accessible by anybody. He's so well done. But any book by Jonathan Sarfati, he's not only a biblical scholar, he knows the Hebrew language inside and out, but he's also a top-notch scientist. So Jonathan Sarfati, if you really want to get into more meat stuff, he's really, really good. But his book, Refuting Evolution, top-notch, and I would recommend picking that up and reading through it over the weekend. And great stuff for helping address the assumptions built in. Now, why does all this evolution stuff relate to this? Because if you undercut Genesis, then you undercut everything God teaches about what is good there, and now you are free to do what you want, right? So this is the foundational stuff. So, okay, thank you for everybody who participated, and we're back again next Sunday, and we will keep marching on. Hopefully to get our next series ready to go soon.